Hello, hello, hello. Happy Saturday. Really looking forward to today's live. This is another live for my project, Women Who Write Books, where I talk to women who've written books and just find out their writing process and learn more about how they made it happen. So we're just going to wait a few minutes for some of you to join on. Let me know if you're watching, who you are, where you're based, and we can get started. Hey, you're here, you're here. Right. There should be an option for you to request to join me. You made it. Hi,
Good
Michelle.
morning.
Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm not too bad, thanks. How are you?
I'm fabulous. You look lovely.
Thank
Really
you. Thank
nice.
you for having me this morning.
I'm really pleased. And we've got a similar background a little bit. Some of these I think you've sent me.
Have I? I thought they looked good.
They do look good. So brilliant. Thank you so much for joining me this morning for Women Who Write Books. So far I've had a chat with two authors, completely different, who've talked about the process of their writing, because as writers, it's just fascinating to find out how we're all doing it. So for those who don't already know you, tell us a little bit about who you are and where you're based.
My name's Michelle Mclean, she, her. I'm based in the West Midlands, born and bred. I've been writing probably since childhood, but only been calling myself a writer for probably the last 6 months.
Okay.
I have a regular day job, I have a family, I'm married, but writing is something that I'm very passionate about, so I try my best to find time for it outside of all those other commitments that I have.
Brilliant. And we're going to delve in deeper into some of what you've said there, because for me, I'm like, only 6 months you've considered yourself a writer. I know you've
Mm.
always been scribbling. So with that in mind, when and why did you start writing?
I probably started writing as a child. The usual things like making up scenes and scenarios, writing little stories, writing really dodgy acrostic poems. And then as I got a little bit older, diaries and journals, always writing something. I remember in my early teens, I had a pen pal in America. And I
Okay.
used to, this is, with the old analogue days, I used to exchange letters with somebody and wait 4 weeks for the reply to come back.
Mm.
So I've always been writing in some sort of capacity for pleasure. And then as I got a little bit older and started to go to work, I was always the person who would be asked to write comms,
Mm.
draft letters, write the CVs for my friends. Um, this is in the days sort of before when email was really popular and you were firing off a complaints letter
Yeah.
to a shop or something. People would always say, "Oh, can you write our complaint letter for us?" So
Mm.
I've always been writing one way or the other, but didn't really piece together that that was what I was doing.
Oh, okay. So it's always been there, and I suppose
Mm,
as you've got older, you've kind of,
yeah,
okay, what is this? This is a thing.
yeah.
So what inspired your writing as a child, let's say, and what inspires your writing now? Has it changed much?
I think I've always predominantly written fiction. I've always
Mhm.
been a storyteller, whether that's writing stuff down or even just in the way that I conversate when I'm relaxed with friends and families. It's always a story. I've always got to embellish a bit and draw it out. I think people probably get a bit fed up for that sometimes. It's never straightforward. So I've always been a storyteller and I've always liked to make up my own scenarios, my own
Mm.
characters. I'm also very nosy. So I'll people watch and I'll see things, and in my imagination, I guess I'll put together what I think people are doing, who I think they are, where they've come from, and make up my own stories and worlds about people. And I've just always been drawn to doing that.
Mm.
And that's still the same now, decades later in adulthood, when I'm starting to write professionally. I'm still very interested in what makes people tick. I'm interested in the ordinary because I think
Yes.
there's stories behind the ordinary. And I like to draw that out through my fiction. I do a bit of non-fiction as well. I've got a blog,
Mhm.
which is more linked to my professional work. That's
Mhm.
a lot more informal. It's a lot more intuitive, just me talking about things that I observe and what feelings it
Mhm.
brings up for me. And I write those blogs in the hope that it will connect with people and they can see a bit of themselves in those blog posts and kind of identify what's going on for them.
Mm. So a wide variety there then, and in the
Mm,
spirit of being nosy, which I think it's an important part of your personality that you need to have to be a writer. You have to be
yes.
curious. You recently became an author,
Yeah.
and you published a whole book.
So, yeah. Book twins. Yes, I did.
So tell us about your book. Tell us about what is Payday and other Teabreak tales.
So this is quite a slim book. If you've not seen it before, I haven't got a copy, and it's a collection of short stories. Um, and the idea behind it came from people commenting on how much I read. So I do read a lot. I enjoy reading. I think this year so far I've read 21, 22 books.
Amazing.
I tend to read a lot, something that I do for pleasure. And people would say, gosh, how do you read so much? I don't know how you manage, I'd love to read, but I don't have the time. And there just seems to be a common theme in people saying this. And I think if you're a busy person, you've got commitments, it can be quite intimidating to pick up a big, thick novel like that.
Mm-hmm.
You read, 15, 20 pages, and then you're tired, you're falling asleep. It might be a few more days before you pick it up again. When you do, you've forgotten what you've read. So I really wanted to create something that was accessible to people who perhaps don't read very often but want to. So that was where I got the idea for short stories. The idea being in the time it takes you to sit down and have a cup of coffee on your break or whatever,
Yeah.
you can divulge into a complete short story in sort of 10 to 15 minutes.
Amazing. And you know what I really like this, but I'm also dead biased because I was one of the first people to read some of the stories in here, and it really. But what I like about it is it's just about some people you might come across at the train station, some people you might come across at the pub, and you wouldn't know their stories, and it kind of gives you a bit of an insight into what might be going on behind the scenes. And you did say you're quite interested in the ordinary, but actually when you delve into some of these stories, there's some extraordinary stuff going on.
Yeah, and a lot of this came from things that I observed. I used to commute to Stafford, and I had about an hour's travel each way every day, travelling by train. And I just used to observe the things around me, and I just see really regular people doing really regular and mundane things. And I just think, I wonder where they live. I wonder what they did before they got to work, or I wonder who their family are. And that just sort of brought up the ideas for some of these stories. So I don't want to spoil it in case there's some people listening who haven't read some of the stories yet. But we've got really regular people who just do sometimes the bravest things, sometimes the silliest things, sometimes criminal things that we would not be expecting from those people. They are the people who walk amongst us every day. They are us.
I highly recommend for anyone watching who hasn't read this yet to get yourself a copy. A really great read with a nice cup of tea, I have to say.
Thank you.
So you've written your first book, okay, but I know that you're always writing. So in regards to your book though, how did you make time to write your book, especially around all your other commitments? How did you make it happen?
Not always easy. Part of it was because I was studying at the time and doing an undergraduate's degree in creative writing. I was also working, but studying gave me that commitment of deadlines. I had to have pieces of writing in at certain points in time. So that allowed me to keep the discipline of showing up for myself and writing regularly because I had to meet deadlines. Once university had finished and I decided to actually do some more work on the stories and actually put them into a collection to publish, it was just a case really of committing to the project. Now, no one made me do this. No one told me to write this book. I wanted to do it. So I needed to show up for myself and just commit to doing it. And I think with writing, people think there's this mystery around it, that it's something really tricky and it's something really hard to do. And I often meet people who say, oh, I've always wanted to write a book, but many people don't. And I think as writers, we've got a bit of a responsibility really to remove the mystery of writing from it, to make it more accessible to other people. I don't see it any different to playing an instrument or crafting or making or dancing or singing. It's a creative outlet that you've just got to apply yourself to and do it to get better at it. There's no magic trick to it. So to go back to your question of how did I do it, just a case of showing up for myself really and giving myself some deadlines. Once the structure of university had been taken away, I had to put my own structure in place. Finding other writers, finding a tribe of writers also helps because you've got people to have a moan to, you've got a bit of accountability, you've got people to look at drafts for you and things like that. So surrounding yourself with other writers is also helpful if that's available to you.
Brilliant. Yeah, some great points there. And it is about, if you want to write a book, And, you know, I suppose university gave you that structure, like you said, in regards to deadlines. But maybe if you're someone who wants to write a book and you don't have uni, but you have a goal for yourself, it is about giving yourself your own deadlines. What, you know, but also it sounds like surrounding yourself with a community that also is interested and also understands your creativity. So with that in mind then, so what has writing this book taught you about yourself?
I think it's shown me what I'm capable of doing. Myself and most writers I know always have doubt. Like, it's not going to be good, nobody will want to read it, what's the point? And that doesn't really go away, I don't think. But actually putting it out into the world, having people pay money for it, and then feed back to me on what they thought of it and what stories they've enjoyed. I don't want to use the word validation, although I suppose that is a part of it. But it's more just for myself. It makes me think, okay, well, I've got something here to then build on and continue to hone my craft, and it's motivated me to want to get better. It's taught me that there's always another draft you can do. Doesn't matter how much you polish a piece of writing and how many times you work on it and maybe send it out to people to look at for you and comment, there's always another draft in you. And so for me, I've learned lessons in knowing when I just need to draw the line. Like knowing that this is as good as I can get it. And if I let myself, I'll work on it for 100 more years. There's got to be a point when you let your babies out into the world and just say, it is what it is. I've got to let it out there now. I've got to let my art go and let other people share it. I've also learned that I want to do more of it. When I published this book, it was more about achieving a personal goal, and it felt like an end point. It was something that I'd always wanted to do, and I thought that I'd do it, and then that would be the end, like tick, I've done it. But now it feels like it's just the start. One, because I feel like I'm at the very early part of my journey as a writer. I've got a lot more to learn. I've got a lot more development to do with my craft, and that's exciting. I'm looking forward to just continuing to get better. But now I've written one thing, I feel like I've got more stories to tell. So I can't close my laptop now. You know, I've got to do something with those stories. And I think also as writers, we get scared to share our work. You know, we have notebooks full of stuff. We've got documents and files on laptops and devices, and they sit there, in my case, sometimes for years. And sometimes telling your story isn't always about people receiving it and responding to it. Sometimes it's just about you needing to tell it. So for me now, what's driving me is a need to tell these stories. If I have an audience for them, that's a bonus. But even without an audience, I know that I've got stories to tell, and I need an outlet, I need somewhere to put those stories. So there'll definitely be more books coming.
I love that. And I love that real honesty about, you know, how you've almost as though you thought you would write the book and it would be done, but have realised, well, no, this is not the end of the journey, this is the beginning of a new one. Because I'm just thinking about when I first published my first book. I just wanted to write that book, and I didn't really care if it was good, and it really wasn't. But I published it and I did it and I got it out, and then what came afterwards I could never plan for. So it's almost like, and I want to say this to writers everywhere, is that you think that you'll write the book and that's it, you've done it, you're successful, and in a way you are right, you've reached that goal. But there's so much that can come after publishing your book. And I'm going to throw you a question that wasn't on the list that I sent you. So what's happened for you in terms of writing and opportunities since you've published your book? What have you been up to?
Lots of stuff that I hadn't expected, really. Beyond writing the book, there was no plan. I'd only sort of thought as far ahead as, let me get this book ready, let me get it out into the world. There was no plan after that. And since then, opportunities have just sort of been presenting themselves to me. So I've worked with a couple of groups of young people who are studying English and English Lit GCSE. And I've come and given them support around the creative writing element of that. That was really good fun. I felt a lot of satisfaction from doing that. I've been working with adults in workplaces on their well-being, so writing for well-being, and showing people how you don't have to write because you want to write a book. You can just write because it's a really good way to take care of your mental health. So I've got a series of those workshops in the pipeline. I've got a gig as a staff writer on a magazine. So I've just handed in my first sort of piece for that magazine. I'll share more about that once I know whether the piece is going to go into the magazine. And again, that was great, but also learning, because I've never had to work to a copy deadline. So that was new.
Mm-hmm.
Although I've had people look at my book and critique it, I've never worked with an editor officially.
Yeah.
So this is a new experience for me as well, sending in a piece of work and having an editor come back and sort of say, I want this, that, the other.
Mm,
The work's not mine anymore. It's now a
yeah.
shared piece with somebody else. So that's new. But all of this has come off the back of writing a book. And when I try to identify why, I can't really pinpoint a specific trigger. I'd love to say it's because people have read my book and think it's amazing and wanted to book me, but I don't think it's that. I think it's just more about an inner confidence. I'm calling myself a
Yeah.
writer now. I'm putting myself out there. I'm saying yes to things that involve writing. Before I
Mm-hmm.
published my book, if these opportunities had come up, I would have said no. I would have thought, I'm not qualified to do this. I can't. I don't have any work out there. Why would you want me to come and do this for you? So
See,
having
that's
that book
so
on a bookshelf
interesting.
now makes me feel like I can say yes to these
Yeah, so
opportunities.
because you've written your book and it's out there, you've almost proven to that part of yourself that would have otherwise refused the or declined these
Mm.
opportunities.
Yeah,
Amazing. And that kind of goes back to, in the sense that it doesn't matter what other people say to you. Because if you'd have said to me, these opportunities have come up before you'd written your book, I would have said go for them. But you have to believe in it. You have to believe that you're
yeah,
qualified or the best person, or why
yeah,
not. So it doesn't matter what anyone else around you would have said. Ultimately, it came down to, actually, do I believe I can do this?
yeah. And I do believe that one opportunity tends to lead to another. So I don't think we should say yes to things blindly. We need to
Yeah.
consider the things we say yes to. But in my experience, when I say yes to one thing, there's a
Mm,
bit of a domino effect, and there's usually something else that kind of comes along. And that's definitely what I've been experiencing. My book was published in October of last
mhm.
year, and every month since, something's come up that's presented a writing opportunity for me.
Which is amazing. And this is only just the beginning.
I
I'm
know.
just going to quickly read some of the
Okay.
comments. And we will have time for question and answers shortly. So if you're starting to get some questions, post them in the comments and we'll get to you shortly. So I've just waved at somebody. Bear with me. I wanted to see the comments. We've got congrats. We've got would love a follow up to payday. I co-sign this. I would also love a follow up. I feel like as well with
For
some of the
me,
stories in here would make like a nice little series. Like I'm curious. I want to know more.
maybe. Maybe it's in
Um,
progress.
oh, okay. Well, we never know. I'm sure we'll find out. Um, okay, so Divine Alchemy Shop says that's so great to hear. It's a therapy to write the book. So, like, did you
Definitely.
find that process quite therapeutic, like getting lost in your world?
Yeah, because our brains, we have so much going on, whether you're right or not. We're busy people we've got lots going on.
Mm,
But when you're also a creative person, whether that's writing
mm,
or something else, it can feel like all the tabs are open in your brain and you've got to close them down sometimes and get it out somewhere. So definitely writing
mm.
for me is a release of some of those tabs that are open in my head.
I've also got. I think this is your mum. Loving both of your backgrounds. Wow, there you go. We're matchy today a bit. We are a bit matching today. Okay, brilliant. Okay, so, I don't know all of who we've got in the room, but there's a good chance people who are watching this live now or on the replay are also aspiring authors who
Mm-hmm.
also may have an idea or may have even got a book and just not followed the publishing process just yet.
Yep.
So with your experience and, let's keep in mind, yeah, you're a published author as well, but you've got a whole degree in creative writing. What advice do you want to give for aspiring authors?
Got three pieces of advice. And the first thing I would say is have the courage to create.
Mhm.
Yeah, just have the courage to create. Doesn't matter who's reading it, where it's going, whether it's good, whether it's a rough draft. Just have the courage to create. Just make
Mhm.
something, whether it's with your words or, whether you're a poet or a performance artist, however you write, just have the courage to create something. Even if initially that is for your eyes and ears only, it's about taking that first step. So have the courage to create is my first piece of
Mhm.
advice. Um, my second piece of advice is that there are no perfect conditions, so the time to start is now. You don't need a high-spec laptop, posh stationery,
Mhm.
your own private office in your home. Those things are great if you can have them. They're very helpful to writers, but it's not necessary to have all of those things. You might just have a big biro from Poundland, and a recycled paper notebook. Yeah,
Mm.
but make a start. Just make a start. Because if you wait for the conditions to be ideal, you will always be waiting, because there'll always be something that's happening, there'll always be something getting in the way, there'll always be something swallowing your time. So you've just got to get going. You've just got to get going. I waited years and years to publish this book, and now that I've done it, I don't know why I waited. I started my undergraduate's degree in my early 30s when I had a toddler and a baby, because I was always waiting for the right time to come along for me to do that. And then I realised there wasn't going to be a right time, so I just needed to do it. So that's my second piece of advice. Don't wait for the conditions to be perfect, just make a start. My third and final piece of advice is just call yourself a writer. Just do it. Yeah. If you like writing and you're writing something, just call yourself a writer.
Yeah.
Because I think there's an incredible power in giving names to ourselves for things. And then once you call yourself a writer, it's like a reclamation of the word, really. You start to claim it. You start to act like it. You start to be it. And I do think that writing does come from being, not doing.
Yes.
It's not necessarily about having a list of things that you must do and times that you must do them. It's about a sense of being like a writer. So if you just claim it today and you say, I'm a writer, then ask yourself, how do I show up as a writer?
Yes.
And then ask yourself the same question tomorrow. How do I show up as a writer? And ask yourself that question every day until you are being like how you imagine a writer to be. And that will look different for all of us, because we're not all the same type of writer. But for me, once I started to say, yes, I'm a writer, even since October, I've developed habits and practices that make me show up for myself and show up as a writer every day, because you're not going to get anything produced if you're not writing. So you've got to start showing up. So call yourself a writer, even if you don't feel like one.
Love that. That's so powerful. That is so amazing. And it's about giving yourself permission to own it, because you are, and giving yourself permission
You've
to.
got to own it.
So thank you so much for that advice. Everybody who is watching, I want you to think about any questions that you might have for Michelle and just post them in the chat, and we'll go through them one by one. But before we start doing that, so you have a think about what that might be. But Michelle, a question for you then. So when people come across your writing for the first time, what do you hope their takeaway is?
For my fiction writing, I just want to give them an escape. I just want them to take away an escape. Stories are a safe way to leave wherever we are and delve into something new and different. Even if it's just for 5 minutes and you read a couple of pages, stories create a safe space for us to leave wherever we are. So I don't have any sort of profound quote, about what I want my readers to take away. I just want them to have that escape, that release. Stories are entertainment. Fictional stories are for your entertainment. So if somebody just reads 3 pages of my book while they're having a couple of cups of tea, or having a cake break, I just want them to have that release and that escape from whatever day-to-day looks like for them. And if they take additional meaning from the stories and the characters, then that's great. But for me, it's really not that deep. It's just allowing people a different place to go.
Love that. And what about your non-fiction?
My non-fiction is slightly different. So I tend to blog around themes of nature, connection to self, authenticity, and how we sort of navigate our way through the natural changes that occur in day-to-day life. So that's what my blogging is about. So my takeaways that I want people to have from the blog is that most of the things that are probably happening to you and the experiences you're having, there will be other people having a similar sort of experience. You can feel quite alone when you're going through something difficult. And I want people to know that they're not. It can be quite isolating, but there are other people. And I'm also trying to normalise those experiences. So if someone's going through, they've lost their job or they've got a new boss and having a rubbish time, it can feel horrible. So I try to share tools and techniques to help people to cope better with that. So from my blog, I just really want people to come away feeling less of a sense of isolation, more of a sense of community, and some practical how-tos of how they can make their situation a little bit easier.
Brilliant. I love that. Okay, so we've got some comments, I think. Yep. Powerful advice. You do get to label who you are and work towards that. That's good stuff. Ellie said very inspiring. Absolutely. Blue Magic, can you DM? I don't understand what this is all about. So, Women Who Write Books is an Instagram live series where we're talking to authors about their writing process, writing tips, and more about their book. Okay, so Karen says, how do you get started when you don't know where to start? So, for example, feeling a bit overwhelmed with the process.
That's a really good question. I think the blank page or the blank screen can be really intimidating. Especially if you're on a deadline, it's even more intimidating. You've got to sort of come up with words from somewhere and sometimes just don't have any. There's lots of different techniques that you can use for this, but I'll just talk to you a little bit about the one that I use, and that's free writing. So I do free writing every morning when I wake up. I've just got a notebook like this, a bit of a rough book, biro, nothing posh, and every morning before I get into my day, I just free write. So that's a technique where you just write what comes to mind. You don't read back what you've read, you don't edit, you don't look at your spelling and your punctuation, you just write a stream of consciousness bit of writing. Sometimes I come up with something really profound, I think, wow, did I write that? Most days it's gobbledygook.
Okay.
And if you have nothing to write, you can put, I don't know what to write, I have no words, I am not writing, and eventually something will come. And then later on in the day, I normally do this at bedtime, I'll go back to the page that I wrote that morning with a different coloured pen or a highlighter, read back through what I've wrote, try to make sense of it. And I'll just underline words or phrases that I like, that I think, oh, that could be something, that could be a character, or that could be an idea for a poem, and just underline key bits. And most days, amongst all the gobbledygook that I'll scribble down, there'll be something in there that will sort of act as a writing prompt for me, which I can then use to go and do a proper piece of writing. So it's essentially like a writing warm-up. But other ways to do it is just write lists. Start by listing. So I don't know, say you're writing a blog about gardening. Just write a list of whatever words come to your mind about that theme. Bullet points, anything. Go online and Google an image, or if you've got photographs or postcard things in the house, pick one up, pick up an image. Write down what that image brings up for you, what feelings does it evoke. And just treat all of these things as warm-ups. It's okay for the first few things you write down to be really rough and ready and not mean anything. But from that, you can probably distill a few things that you can then build upon.
So it's almost like release the need to be perfect when you're doing it. You're just creating, and that's it.
Yeah.
Which is important. Brilliant, thank you. We did have a question actually. Do you have a strategy when writing? Is that your strategy, or do you have anything else that you do as well?
So you get plotters and you get seat of the pants. I am seat of the pants. If it's fiction, I don't plot. I don't, sort of do beginning, middle and end. Characters come to me first. I will form a character, and then for me, the character starts to tell me their story. So it's quite an organic process. I get asked this a lot, and I wish I had this really technical formula that I could give people, but I don't have one. I'm sure the writers who you're going to speak to who do, but I'm not one of them. I'm definitely seat of the pants. The character just starts to tell me their story. That said, when you're then getting into sort of second and third drafts, obviously you start to shape it, and you've probably got a bit of an idea of structure and where you want it to go. But for first drafts, definitely, I just write, and I try my best not to police myself too much, because I think when we police ourselves, it kills creativity. Like, I am the worst for just going over and over and over the first paragraph, and then because I'm doing that, the rest of the story doesn't get told. I'm just trying to polish the first paragraph, so I've learned not to do that.
A lot of people do that, and I always say, don't worry about it being perfect, just write your book, then you know what you're working with, or write your story, then you know what you've got.
Stephen King has this book called On Writing, and it's part memoir, it's part writing techniques. If you haven't read it and you're interested in writing, really recommend it, because it's really accessible. So check out your library, see if they've got it. On Writing by Stephen King. And one of his main points of advice that I've never forgotten is, write your crap first draft. Just get the crap written. Doesn't matter whether the spelling's right, whether you've used a lovely, beautiful metaphor, whether you've written something smart. Just get the rubbish first draft down, and then you've got something to work with after that. And that's advice that I tend to use when I'm writing as well.
It's a good book, that is. Really great book.
Yeah.
Okay, so you kind of answered the next question from NL Publishing Services, what's best, planning out your books or just making it up as you go? But I think different writers have different processes, because you get plotters and
Yeah.
pantsers, and you're a pantser.
Yeah, and I'm
You get
writing a
that.
novel this year as part of, I'm doing an MA in creative writing, and I'm writing a novel, just starting to work on that. I'm doing the research for it. And I think my seat of the pants approach is not going to serve me well for a novel. I am going to do an element of planning, which is new for me. I'm not used to planning, so that's going to be a learning curve for me as well.
Mm. There you go. So, I suppose it sounds like that you're not just completely committed to one way of writing a book, you're actually open to exploring the different ways of
Definitely.
doing it.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, I can't see any more questions. If you've got any more questions, please do throw them in the chat, because Michelle is here. She's given some really great tips, some really great practical tips if you're someone who is thinking of writing a book or just getting into writing. So while we're waiting for people to post their questions in the chat, what has surprised you about your writing process? Is there anything that's happened that you haven't expected?
Oh, it's not really a surprise, but I did my undergraduate's degree.
Hmm.
I did well in my undergraduate's degree, and I produced some writing that I'm proud of, which led to this book. Then I started my master's and felt like a beginner all over again. And I suppose I thought, having done the undergraduates, I think, oh yeah, I'm not too bad at this. This will be all right. And the more you learn, the less you know. So starting my masters and being around some really talented writers and poets, like it's an incredible cohort that I'm on. Some really talented people in that group. And when people do readings, I'm like, oh wow, you've just come up with that in a 5-minute writing exercise. So one of the unexpected things is the more I'm learning about writing, the less I know. And I feel like the gap to getting better is actually getting bigger. But that's okay. That's learning in general, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's key, isn't it? Because if you were to look at your writing from, let's say, 2 years ago,
Oh,
you would have seen
cringe.
actually you've grown so much. So we're always developing, we're always growing, and I always think of it, we're never going to be at the best because we're always going to find something that we can edit. So, but you're always improving.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay. We've got a question. What is the hardest part about writing for you, and what do you find the easiest? I love that question.
The hardest part is probably when it's time to let it go. When you put the
Mm,
end and you send it, whether it's a competition or you're pressing publish on Kindle Direct or whatever, that it's letting your babies out into the world, and it's quite scary because you're working on something and you really care about it, and
mm,
you're trying to do the best that you can do. And like in my case, I wouldn't put it out into the world unless I believed it was good. But then as
yeah.
soon as it's out there, you think, oh gosh, that's probably terrible. Like people are going to think this is awful. What was I doing publishing this?
Mm,
So the hardest part is letting it go. When it goes from being sat on my MacBook to being in people's hands or on people's screens, that's quite scary. Even when I'm just doing a blog post, which is really informal, it's just on my website,
mm,
the audience, is quite a small audience. But whenever I press submit on a blog post, and then I see through the stats that people have read it, I think, oh, I wonder what they thought. Like, do they think that was terrible? Did I totally miss the mark? And I don't think that's ever going to leave me really.
yeah.
Keeps me on my toes.
This is it. This is it. And so you're always, working on developing your craft, which is what you want
Yeah,
to be doing as a writer.
yeah.
We've had another question from Shalina, who says, can you apply the same writing strategy to different genres, children's, teen, self-help?
I should think, yes, you could. But just to labour the point, really, you need to find the strategy that works for you. So years ago, before I did my undergraduate's degree, I read all the books on creative writing. You name them, I've read them. I've read them all. I had all the books of, 365 writing prompts, all these
Mm,
different things. I was just trying to fill myself up on techniques. And each book will tell you a different way to do it.
mm,
And ultimately, you've got to find what works for you. Free
mm,
writing in the morning works for me. I'm more creative in the morning, and it's a quiet time of day in terms of my work and family life. So that works for me. You might like to write at 11 o'clock at night. I'll be
mm,
asleep then, but that might work for you. I write in short pockets each morning. You might prefer to write for 8 hours on a Sunday,
mm,
you know. So I can't give you any one strategy that you can just lift and shift. and apply to your own life, because I don't know your circumstances. So I would say if you're at the early part of your writing career, just dabble, just try different things, try binge writing, try free writing. There's other techniques, clustering, diary, anything really, try it and just find what works for you. Journaling and diary writing is another great entry point into establishing a writing practice. Because if you're feeling intimidated about coming up with a story or a blog post or an article, you could just start by journaling about your day. 2 sentences about your day. That's also writing. And then you can build on that. So maybe just start small and then build your practice upon that foundation.
So, you know, there really is no one size that fits all, because
Definitely
like
not.
you said, you don't know people's circumstances. So it just sounds like you have to, in knowing yourself, you'll know when's best to write and what works for you, and just kind of be open to exploring that. And it sounds like you've really spent time getting to know yourself, so you know when you're most creative. Okay, so we've got a question from Christine. Do you have a favourite word that you love the sound and meaning of? I love this.
Oh gosh, I've got lots of favourite words, and I've got a great big dictionary. It's like this, it's huge. I like things that kind of are tricky on the tongue and you have to practice them a few times. One of my favourite words, which is an old one for me, is malfeasance. I don't even know whether I've said that right. And it came about entirely by accident. I've got a character in my book who does something illegal whilst in a job in public office. And at the time, I was working as a magistrate. So I spoke to the legal advisor about this character and I explained what this character was going to do. And I said, is there actually, like, is this a crime, what he's done, and what's the actual crime? And she says, oh, that's a malfeasance. And if I'm saying that wrong, someone come and tell me how you actually say it. But that's how I say it with my Brummie accent, malfeasance. And I was like, oh, I love this. So I looked it up and it did just perfectly describe my guy and what he was doing. So I love that one because even the sound of it makes him sound like a villain.
Yeah.
You know, it sounds like a bad guy, just the way that word rolls off the tongue. So that's just one of many. I love words in general. I enjoy coming across words that I don't know the meaning of. I'm never embarrassed about not knowing what a word means. I'm always excited when I get a new word and I'm always saying, what does that mean? I've got the dictionary app on my phone. I'm quite sad. Got a dictionary above my desk, got a big dictionary in my dining room. So I'm always looking up new words. I find that a fun thing to do.
Do you have a word that you don't like? Because I do. I'm curious.
No, I don't. What's yours?
I really hate the way that focused is spelled. And I don't know why. I just don't know why people put 2 S's. It looks wrong. And it annoys me every time. And so whenever I spell it, I only ever use 1 S because in my brain that makes sense. And
That looks right to you. There are no words that upset me. Not like that. I like most words. I'll tell you what does wind me up though. Flowery writing.
What do you mean flowery?
So my prose, the way in which I write is it's quite short. The stories are short, but you know, if I can use 10 words to tell you something, I will use 9. I won't use 90, right? That's just how I write. And if I'm reading things that are very metaphorical or huge run-on sentences, it distracts me, it winds me up, and I get really turned off by books like that. So there's no particular word I don't like, but sometimes where the words are presented puts me off, which is a struggle right now because I'm doing a poetry module. I just haven't got it in me. I haven't got the words. There's some great poets around me on my course who've done some beautiful work. I'm just like, oh, teach me. Not right that way.
You're straight to the point. No, that's really good to know.
Definitely.
Okay, we've had some really great questions, and I don't know if anyone wants to throw another one in. Oh, okay. We got a few more. I've missed them. Okay, let's go. There we go. When do you begin the marketing process for your books?
I'm probably the wrong person to ask that question to, but I'll answer as best I can. I don't have a marketing process. I don't have a huge following on social media, and I'm not a highly visible presence on social media. It's not my bag. I'm around, I'm very nosy, so I like to look at what other people are doing, but I'm not particularly active. So my book has sold through word of mouth. I've used my networks, my family, people I've worked and studied with, my LinkedIn, my website, my blog. I talk to people about my book. I talk to other writers. I've really just used my networks. I have no advertising or marketing budget. I've just used my network. So as an example, I visit my local library every week with my children. And when I told them that I had written a book, they instantly wanted a copy. They asked for a copy of my book. And my book is now in my local library. I've got a bookshop that's local that I love, Bear Bookshop in Bearwood. It's a beautiful bookshop. If you haven't been to it, please visit. Not an advert, I just love it. It's a great, great independent bookstore. And Jenny, the bookseller, is really passionate about aspiring writers. She's really supportive of community events. And as soon as I told her that I'd published a book, she invited me to hold my book launch in her shop, and she sells copies of my book in her shop. So those are just a couple of examples of the way in which I've used my networks to get my book out into the world. I'm lucky that I've got friends who are readers. And before my book was sort of publicly available, I asked those friends to read my book, to critique it, to post reviews about it, to share it with people they knew, which they all did, which I'm really grateful for. And that's kind of how my book was marketed. So there is no process. There is no big budget behind it. I'm just relying on readers and other writers to spread the word if they like my work. And doing events like this as well, it's a good opportunity to talk about my work.
Awesome. And I just want to throw in there that you don't need a big advertising budget for your book anyway, because, and everything that you've mentioned there, it's all about building relationships.
Yes, definitely.
And that is how you get your book out there. I was thinking actually I would love to do like a session on marketing your book for self-published authors.
I'd come to that.
I'm going to add that to one of my things while I remember I'll be talking about this. Okay. But also I would also say, you know, if you're, I think it's always good to be talking about your writing process online, and just telling people that you're writing a book and telling people what you're interested in and here's the book, and always talking about the book that you've written. Because I know this is something that I've fallen into myself. I write a book and that's it. You might not see me mention it for 6 months. We need to always be talking about it.
Yeah, and I think there's a bit of a stigma around saying that you're writing a book, because it is a very long process for most writers. You don't just say I'm going to write a book and at the end of March I'll have a book to show you.
Yeah.
It can literally take years. And I think we sometimes get embarrassed. We say, I'm writing a book. And then a month later, someone will say, how's that book going? You're thinking, God, I've written one page. Like, or I've written an outline. So there isn't something to instantly produce. And I think reading and writing, they're quite slow processes. They're slow burners. And we live in a world that's fast and instant. And writing almost goes against the culture.
Yeah.
You know, if I say I'm writing something and you guys come back to me online in a month's time and go, how's it going? Might be going fine, but the chances are I probably won't have done much more on it since I last spoke about it. But that's okay.
Yeah.
You know,
and
it's about taking that pressure off.
About understanding that it is a process. It's not if I press this button, it's going to happen. It's an ongoing process, and you commit to that process.
Yeah.
Okay, Shalina says, could we arrange a coffee morning for writers? I'm from Birmingham and would love to connect with other women writers.
I'd love that.
It's an awesome idea.
Yeah, I'd
love the sound of that. Celia says, are your characters based on close friends or family? And what advice would you give for a writer worried about people recognising themselves in their work, especially when it looks like at quite dark issues? Ooh.
That's a really good question. My characters personally are not based on friends and family. None of my characters are. They are based on people that I've seen. I don't know these people, but people I've observed and I'm out and about, so that they're often rooted in a real person, but the real person is a stranger to me. And then I start to build that character up, and it's entirely make-believe, like entirely make-believe. So my own characters, no, they're not based on friends and family. I think if you're writing something and your characters are based on people you know, and those people are going to read your work, you've really got to try to anonymise them as best you can. So maybe if you're writing about one of your female friends, could you take those character traits and put them into a male character? Just as an example. So you can still use the characters, the beliefs, the behaviours of that person that you know, but you could put them into a different person in your story. That might be one way that you could disguise them. But for me, I don't use friends and family in my writing. Sometimes I use bits of their names just to give them a little nod, but the characters themselves are completely make-believe.
And I think that's what it is, isn't it? It's knowing that as a writer you have creative license, and so if you were writing about a close friend who had 3 kids and she works with you, you can say, it's a mum on the school run, she has one child, and
Yes.
so. And also, I always think as well, if you're writing about dark issues and somebody recognises themselves in your book, I think that says a lot more about them also, because you have no control sometimes over how people resonate with the writing, because there could be somebody out there in the world that feels like you've written about their experience and you have
Yeah.
no control over that. So,
I don't know who it was that said it in one of the many writing books that I've read, but somebody said there are no new stories.
mm,
Every story has already been told. So what you're doing as a writer is you're just putting your own spin on it.
yeah,
Most stories in most genres, you know, they're like templates where they've all been told. So if
mm,
somebody recognises themselves or their situation in your work, that I think that's inevitable at some point because all stories have already been told anyway, and you've
mm,
probably got quite limited control over that.
mm. Brilliant answer. Celia says your book is also in Oldbury Academy Library.
It is, yes, and there's some great writers in that school as well. Some really, really up and coming writers that I'm excited to see what they come up with in the next few years.
Oh, amazing, amazing. Well, we've got 10 minutes left. I don't know if anyone else has any questions left, but I just want to say a big thank you to Michelle for just coming on live on a Saturday morning and talking all about your writing process and just sharing your gems, really, and giving that insight
Thank you
because
for
it's so
having me.
valuable. It's been amazing, and yeah, we made it. Thank you everybody for watching and for asking your questions and for listening. When I share this on the grid, please do share it with anyone that you feel would benefit from the advice that Michelle's been giving. And also follow Michelle if you're not already. Order her book. It is a really great read. And I do have some favourites. So yeah, my favourite is Seen to Be Done. And I
Yes.
really like White Walls because I didn't see that coming.
Okay.
um, and Daddy's Girl's really, really awesome, but I think that one I've probably known a little bit longer.
No spoilers,
Um,
please.
but just read it and then let Michelle know what you think, but also let me know what you think because I'd like to speak to people who've read it because personally I really enjoyed this. But
Thank
thank you
you.
so much, Michelle.
Thanks,
It's been
everyone. Thanks for
amazing.
joining.
And yeah, have a great day,
You
everybody.
too.
See you
See you
later.
soon. Bye.
Bye.